My honor to introduce our speaker for today, Emma, who has been part of the Django community for over a decade and has contributed to open source projects for nearly 20 years now. Thank you so much, Emma, for joining in today. Talking about more, as a co-maintainer and co-author of DRF-Schema-Adapter and other open source libraries, you'll find Emma sharing her knowledge and passion with developers all across the globe as an amazing, and frequent speaker at conferences, DjangoCons, workshops, and most of the times also inspiring folks with insightful articles and blog posts, as you might have seen in your emails. Coming all the way from Belgium, Emma is here today at Djangonaut Space Session 3 to share her valuable experience with us on Django. Looking forward to the next 20 years. The stage is all yours, Emma.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So yeah, we're here to speak about Django and looking forward to the next 20 years. If you've seen any of my latest talks, you might be disappointed to know that I will not have any AI-generated images, but I have plenty of hot takes for you. And I will be glad to discuss all of those hot takes if you want to talk about them with me. This is all the places where you can reach me. I'm also on the Djangonaut Space Discord, so you can ping me there, and I'm more than happy to change my mind on any of those if you want to talk about them. Other than that, my name is Emma. I think everything that had to be said has already been said, so I will skip the introduction slide. And to get started, I would like to ask you a question, and you can answer in chat. And to look at the next 20 years, I'd like to first look at the present, and I want to know why and how you did get started with Django. Maybe it was because of the great admin, or maybe it was because you had a project with your school or your employer that required you to use Django, or maybe it's just because Django is the best Python framework that there is. Or you did a Django Girls workshop or something else, and that's how you got started with Django. So if you could just drop a line in chat or just say out loud how you got started with Django. I'm really curious to know where you all come from. So I've got someone that got assigned a Django project at work. Somebody else said that Django was the obvious choice when they started working with Django. Yeah, this is one common way to get into Django. It's just because this is something that you have to do for work. Lillian attended a DjangoCon and became really invested. So that's also really nice. So now that you've all shared, I want to share with you how I got started with using Django. And like someone else in chat, I did some PHP for a while, and I was shopping for a new framework, and I was looking at a bunch of frameworks. You will probably recognize some of the names in there. You might not recognize some other names because they're old or they disappeared in the meantime. And the thing that made me really stick with Django and start getting invested in Django is that I fell in love with the admin. This was the major deciding factor with Django, but also like a lot of Python, with Django there was one and only one obvious solution, and by that I mean library, for every concern. If I needed to do something with Django, there was a library for that I could use with Django. And the documentation was quite complete, and this was something rare at the time. And I also liked how the ORM worked. If you've worked with if you've worked with other ORMs like SQL Alchemy, for example, you know that not all ORMs are created equal. And I liked the one with Django. I also liked that there was inheritance instead of blueprints, blueprints that you will find in things like Laravel that somebody mentioned. The way migration worked was also really nice, although it was not part of Django core at the time. It was Django South that was doing migration. And I liked the way Python worked in general. But today, why am I still using Django? I cannot say that the admin is the best admin that there is out there anymore. There are other frameworks that do admin at least as nice as Django, and some of them better. There is not anymore one and only one obvious solution for each issues with Django. There's 2, 3, 5, 10 packages for different approach like REST or components and things like that. And the documentation in Django is still quite extensive, but other projects have brought other approaches to documentations and have made them a bit clearer than what Django is. I often find myself when I'm reading the Django documentation, I am quite lost sometimes, going from page to page and having 17 documentation page open at once because I was looking for one thing. I still like the inheritance over blueprints, the DRM, the migration, and Python. But the real reasons why I've stuck with Django is probably the personal investment I've put in Django. So the libraries I've written, the experience I've acquired, and also the community. So that's you here and the great Django community in general. Um, and Today Django is almost 20 years old, and that is great. But we should not pat ourselves on the back too hard here, because there's a lot of projects in Python that are 20 years old. There's Plone, there's Track that is used by Django to track issues. There is Pelican, which is a static website generator. There's also CherryPy. There's quite a few projects in Python that are 20 years old. And some of those projects are still thriving. Some of them are not thriving as much. And one of the reasons for that is that when you get a community around a project, there are people that stay around in the community, but there's also people that leave for many different reasons. And sometimes there's new people that are coming into the project, but not always. And from the introduction, I can see that some of you are pretty new to the Django framework. And but whether you're new or not so new, I want to thank you for being here, because you are part of what makes Django the community. And I want to especially thank the Djangonauts and the stores, because you are the people who are keeping Django alive by showing such interest in doing things with Django and moving Django forwards. So, as I was saying, 20 years in Python is not that rare. And in 20 years, the world evolves quite a bit. Recently, I've been to a city that I hadn't been to in 20 years, and I didn't recognize anything. Everything around me had changed. And unfortunately, when I look at Django and how it was 10, 15 years ago, I sometimes don't see that many changes. Um, there's since the 2.2, since the 2.x series, I've seen Async is a major change, but it's still not fully there, unfortunately. There's been slow and steady improvements in the URM, and that's great because, as I said, this is a part of Django that I love. But when talking to fellows and ex-fellows, I hear a lot that nowadays what gets into Django releases is more bug fixes than new features. Even if there are new features that are steadily coming slowly in every area, there is more big bug fixes than features. And this is what brought me to writing this article, Stability Without Stagnation. And stability without stagnation is the motto for Ember.js. If you don't know Ember.js, it's a front-end JavaScript framework that is a bit younger than Django, but has been quite in sync with its release cycle with Django since the 1.x series. It's got a vibrant and welcoming community, a bit like Django. It is also opinionated and comes with batteries included. And during this comparison, I looked at several aspects of both frameworks that were similar or different. And one of the aspects that I want to dive into today is the different teams that are part of the greater structure of the project. And one thing I noted is that Django has mostly one technical team, which is the steering council. And Django and Ember, sorry, has many of them. There's the steering committee, which would be similar to the steering council, but they also have a framework core team, a tooling team, a data team, and a learning core team. And in the current state of Django, this probably sounds like a luxury, having so many committees and boards and teams, or however you want to call them. Um, but and at some point it might have looked like Django couldn't do something like that because there was not that many people who wanted to get involved at such levels. But the recent DSF board election gave me joy and hope that more people want to get involved with Django because I believe it was the most candidates since a long time for a Django-related election. And so I'm quite glad about that. And one of the things that this luxury of having so many teams and committees offers is what I want to call code ownership, meaning that in Ember, if you want to talk about the ORM, there are a set of people that you know will know the ORM in and out, and that you can talk to them about it. You can raise issues, questions, talk about, hey, how could we do this differently? If you have questions about the CLI tools, so like management comment in Django, you can find somebody there and ask them. And this is great just for speaking, but it is also great for merging code and reviewing code. And so here I have another hot take, and I want to put a big, huge disclaimer. This is not, this has nothing to do with the people who were involved with this pull request. Jake is doing an amazing work recently with Django and pushing a lot of stuff. It's more a critique of the process and how things have come to pass in Django. So for a little bit of context, I'm talking about the pull request that was merged yesterday about bringing a simple block tag decorator in Django. And when I look closer at the code that was merged, this is basically the code that there is. I know that there is a scroll bar and that not everything fits on the screen, but the most important stuff is here at the top. And this is the new code that was added as part of this merge request. And if you look at that code and I go to the next slide, this is another method of the same class, the template library class. That was already there. This is the code for the simple tag. And if you look at it a bit more in that class, you will see that there is yet another place with very similar code. And so what I want to highlight here is that, but when you do a pull request, what people see, people who are reviewing that pull request, what they see is the new code, the modified code. They don't always they don't see the existing code. So unless somebody is very familiar with that specific piece of code, there are things that they might miss, like here for the fact that basically we have 3 times the same method with very slight changes that has been defined. And if that was happening in one of my projects, I would probably raise a little flag and say, hey, probably it's time for refactoring here, and maybe we want to put that similar code somewhere in another method and call that or do something differently. But this is something that is only possible if people have ownership of the code and know exactly what they're reviewing and are very familiar with that part of the code. And so this morning I reached out to Jake and I asked him, well, did you look at the rest of the class and did you think about refactoring this? And he told, and if you did, why didn't you? And basically he told me that he wanted to keep the pull request as lightweight as possible. So refactoring was outside the scope of the pull request. And unfortunately, this is something that I've seen a lot. I've experienced it myself. I currently have a merge request, pull request open somewhere. That and in a comment somebody asked, why aren't you doing this and that and that in that pull request? And my answer was, I want to keep it as lightweight as possible so that there is no bike shedding possible on this merge request. And this is and this is something that happens a lot. And so unfortunately, in this case, this leads to more work probably in the future, because know that this pull request of Jake has been merged. I am, after this call, I'm going to open an issue to say, hey, maybe it's time to refactor here. And this means that there's going to be another review process and more time spent and probably a bit of bike shedding thrown in the middle, and things like that. But before going any further on that, I want to ask you to go in chat or open your mic and tell me if you yourself have spotted something like that in Django, because right now you're spending a lot of time inside of Django, inside the code itself. So I know that during Simon's session on Monday, somebody mentioned something about row locking that might now be legacy because all the databases support it, or if you've seen things that don't feel right and that you think should probably be revisited inside the code of Django.
I know there's been a lot of talk about redoing like the start project command and like the initial code like that, regarding your something that could benefit from a more modern approach. I would say that the community is looking at.
Yeah, that's a great example. When I wrote about something that could benefit a more modern approach, I was thinking about the not so recent anymore, but the change to using passlib instead of using OS module that appeared in Django. So I'm going to go to the next, unless Somebody else wants to mention something they've seen?
I don't know this area too well, but I think I've heard about the templating. It's not easy to work with, and I think there was a forum discussion about making it easier to extend the templating system instead of like having to override an entire page every time you implement it.
Yeah, I've seen some talks about the template, and this about the template tag here is really part of that. And also, yes, support for partial templates. No, the warning I want to raise now is that if you're going to be creating issues on Django's track, saying, hey, this should be refactored, and we could change this to make it more modern or something. A very likely answer will be that you need to create a DApp, and that is not an issue to be raised directly in the tracker, but that you should create a DApp and launch a discussion in the forum. And the dApps is another point of comparison I had in my article. And because Ember has something very similar to the DApp process, they call it an RFC process. And there are some differences between the RFC process and the DApp process. One is the barrier to entry, which for a lot of different small reasons, creating a DApp in Django is more complicated than creating an RFC in Ember. And in my opinion, this creates a barrier to contribute, and barriers to contributions can be good because they help to keep the sanity of the fellows who have to review the pull request and the issues. But if this barrier is too high, it can also prevent people to want to contribute. And I feel that we see this with Django because when we look at the number of dApps in Django, there is 14 accepted dApps. I believe there are 2 in progress dApps. And when you look at Ember, you see that they have over 1,000 RFCs that are either in progress or have been accepted or going there. So it's a very, very different scale there. And making dApps more accessible in the midterm is something that I would like to see, because dApps are hard. It's a complex process. You need to start a discussion on the forum. You have to spend the mental energy to deal with the backshedding that goes with the discussion. You have to find a shepherd to help you. You have to brush up on your RST because it's written in RST. And all in all, when you add all those steps, it makes it hard to even get started to do a dApp. So I'm curious, can you do a quick show of hands to see who is familiar with the dApp process in Django, first of all? Yeah, I see 1 hand, 2 hands. Okay. And among those people, who has ever written a dApp successfully? So I see no hands at all. So I think this is a hot take, but I think this proves my point. Yeah, I see Alex's comment, and it feels like very little people feel ready to write a dApp. I've seen somebody who's currently on the DSF board say recently that they were not confident writing a dApp. And maybe those things that I mentioned, those refactoring and small things, maybe they are good candidates for dApps because they might be easier to sell than a whole new feature. New features are hard to sell, and maybe creating maintenance dApps would be a good place to start. And the reason I'm trying to sell this depth process and try to encourage you to raise issues that might turn into maintenance depth is that one of the things that I would love for stars that are have graduated from the Djangonaut project is to be able to hold other contributors' hand in the creation of dApps to help people get their foot into contributing to Django and adding feature. And one way, the best way to be familiar with the dApp process and be able to help others write dApps is to have written some dApps yourself. And I also want you to be careful there. I'm pushing you to write devs and so that you can help others, but you need also to be mindful of your own time. I think that having people to guide others writing devs can be very useful to avoid wasting time, but you should also be careful not to waste your own time in helping too much people in writing depths that you don't believe in and things like that. So if you do just this and start writing depth and are able to help others, be very careful and mindful to also not get burned in there and spend too much time and get discouraged later. But all in all, some people say that Django is done, and I believe that Django is not done. In French, there is a saying, it says, qui n'avance pas recule, which means that if you stand still, you fall behind. And I believe that Django is at a very pivotal time in its history where it needs to move forward again in order not to fall behind. And there's a lot of places where there are small improvements that can be done. There's the maintenance that I talked about, but there is also tooling, debug, upgrades. Right now, there's, for example, for the upgrade, there is this great packages, Django upgrade. I'm not sure what's going to happen now that Adam stepped down from the committee. There's a lot of small things that can be done with forms, with Ajax components, the admin, all those things. So in the midterm, I really want to make this hard thing, the debt process, less hard. But in the short term, I think if we can help people get involved in this process, and just by sheer fact of seeing, oh, no, we have 100 debts, maybe this will not sound so scary to a lot of people, and maybe some other people will get involved. So I guess I'm about at the end of my time, and it is no time for questions.
Thank you, Emma. This was amazing talk.
Thank you.
So yes, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hands, and unmute yourself, or put them in chat. Yes, Tim, please go ahead.
Emma, fantastic talk. I really enjoyed it. Regarding the depths and the maintenance depths, would you see that as us? I'm assuming you're familiar with the dep process because you did the comparison, but like, would you see that as us needing to refactor the dep process, or do we need to create, like for the maintenance dep, like would that be a separate slimmed down version of the existing one?
So as things stands right now, I think that it would be great to start with the full depth process for maintenance. It's not ideal, but get things moving. In the future, I am a strong believer that the depth process needs to be refactored. Um, you mentioned somebody raising the language barrier because the language used in the depth one is quite high and might not be accessible to someone who's not a native English speaker. I have seen Sarah say that she was not ready to write a depth. So for me, this is a signal that says, yes, there's something wrong with the depth process. So the depth process needs to be refactored. And I hope that this is something that the next steering council can tackle. But I don't think it's going to go smoothly. I think this is going to take time. And while this is going on, there is no reason to delay things and try to go further.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. The next question is up from Alex. Do you believe part of the stagnation is due to the steering council technically not having that many written obligations other than voting in depths? Do you think the council should be amended to have more soft obligations like shepherding or commenting on features?
Yes, so I've recently looked at the obligation of the steering council, and my reaction there was, okay, but this looks a lot like this work is already done by the fellows, and there is not much left to do for the steering council. So yes, I would love for the steering council to be more involved, like in steering itself, like the name implies, and show the direction for the Django for the future releases for the next, maybe not the next 20 years, but for the next 2 or 5 years. And this it would be great if they could shepherd more depths. I don't know if in the current situation I feel confident requiring that from the steering council, as we've established that the process is difficult and so many people don't feel confident with it. But yes, I would love also to see something like feature requests from the steering council. So say, identify, hey, this is something that is missing in Django. People would like to work on this to step forward. So reversing the depth process instead of having people come up with features and say, hey, I want to have this merged in Django, having Django say, hey, we would like to have this feature. Does someone want to help?
Hope this answers your questions, Alex. On the same note, you mentioned features, right? There was in your blog post, you had touched base on feature flags too. Would you like to enlighten on that?
Yes, so one way of moving forward and bringing new stuff to a project without breaking everything, and so keeping the stability is having feature flags so that some new features and some new behavior can be introduced in the project. They can be tested by the community at large without impacting the large user base that relies on the stability of the project. So features flagged is a known way of doing that. For bigger things, I'm also thinking of introducing duplicates. So I'm going to take the admin as an example because it's the elephant in the Django room. There's very few people that are familiar with how the admin works. And I would even say that the Django admin is not written in Django, as it is not comparable to anything else in Django. And for example, we could have have the admin and have a Django contrib new admin where people start adding new features and start refactoring that code and keep the old admin and the new admin in the code and have that behind the feature flag. Do you want your project to use the old admin, or do you want to use the brand new admin that's going to break every 2 weeks, but you agree with that and you want to help improve that? And this could be, I've taken the admin because it's a really big part, but this could be used, for example, for the start project. We could keep the old start project comment, and next to the old start project, we could have brand new start project, and people could try using it and going forward. I believe that this is a more viable approach than asking people to create third-party libraries and saying, hey, maybe your third-party library will be included in Django core later on, because there's, first of all, a visibility problem. If I'm brand new to the Django community, I can publish 15 packages, nobody will ever see them unless they stumble upon it on GitHub or something. And also, to my knowledge, there's very little libraries that have been actually included in Django. There is Django braces, and that's pretty much it. South was not integrated in Django. It was picked, but it was rewritten into Django core. It was not the same library. So yeah, this kind of extended feature flag is something that I would see would be useful to help Django move forward.
That's really thought-provoking. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Okay. So we have a question from Lillian. Can you tell us more about the learning core team at Ember?
I can try to tell you a little bit more about them. So they're in charge of, among other things, they're in charge of the documentation website that is quite nice. If you go look at the Android documentation, it's one of the best documented projects I know. They also spend a lot of time on Discord. Ember has a very active Discord. And there's people who spend a huge, probably an unhealthy amount of time there answering questions. And if you're new or experienced, if you go to the Django Discord and have a correct question, a well-formed question about Ember, you will find somebody that will answer you. I believe they're also involved in organizing other things like workshops and things like that. But I don't want to say anything that I'm not sure about. The learning team is about 10 people to give you an idea. So the learning core team is larger than the Django steering console. So this is something that is taken quite seriously.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you so much, Emma, for broadening all these amazing perspective. Thank you so much for joining in today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.